Everybody, welcome. X's and Knowles 24/7. I'm here. Trey Rowland, Adam Brown, Kevin Little. Guys, we are in the dog days, the doldrums of summer. So we thought it would be a nice time to start a new video format, a new series for you guys. We're going to call this our Summer Conversation series on Knowles247.com. We're going to take a bunch of kind of hot, maybe controversial topics. We're going to discuss them right now. It's going to be kind of the OGXs and Knowles crew. I think throughout the summer, obviously, you guys suggest topics. We'll kind of go from there. Our plan is to have like a mix of like guys from Knowles 24/7, maybe mixing it up, different hosts, different topics, maybe different formats, just all the kind of juicy storylines and questions that you guys are talking about in the fan base. We want to cover that, and this will be just kind of an open forum discussion series. This first one is a particularly juicy one because the prompt that we're going to be talking about today is, will new offensive coordinator Gus Malzahn be able to salvage Mike Norvell's tenure and ultimately his job at Florida State? You start talking about stuff like this is when normally kind of the heated opinions come up. I like this topic. I have plenty of thoughts going in, but I'm going to defer to the smarter people. Adam, what say you? Like, this was your topic. You were the genesis of this, so I want to see where your head's at.
You can't say you're going to talk to the smarter people and then immediately go to me and not the freaking chemist over there. All right, that's not how this
smarter.
works.
It's not in order.
Not how this.
Yeah, you're the football coach, man.
Listen, you're both smarter than me. I'm not saying who's smarter than who, but I know you're both smarter than me.
So I think the conversation is interesting, and it just kind of came to me in the middle of the day the other day. I was just thinking about this team and giving myself a gigantic headache in the process.
He cares about you folks. He cares to think about this team.
It just, Mike's at a point, obviously at a giant crossroads in his tenure here at Florida State, after the season last year, of trying to reestablish the floor. The floor obviously fell out last year, but he's got to try to reestablish a floor for the program. And I think a guy like Gus, while maybe not the flashiest hire, maybe Brendan Marion, which I wasn't in love with the prospects of that hire, but there were some that were. A Brendan Marion may have been flashier. I think a Gus is safe though, and it feels like right now Mike needs a bit of safe in his program. He needs to get back to having a floor to this program to get him back in bowl game contention and kind of getting the footing back up underneath of him, up underneath of himself. If he's not able to do that, then I think you look at, potentially this being, his last year or maybe in 26, but like they've got to find a way to reestablish, okay, we're at least going to be in bowl contention every year, not in contention of having the worst offense in all of college football, not even being in contention to make a bowl game. Like that's just, I mean, when you say it out loud, it just feels really ugly. And like, it's crazy to think you had to go hire an offensive coordinator, but I feel like Gus is that. Like, he's going to run the ball. You know what they're going to do. They're going to have a decent amount of success at it. It's not going to be elite. It's not going to be flashy, but it is going to come in and be consistent week in and week out and give you an opportunity to be in ball games. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, to me, I think when you think about this question, it's like if this guy is the missing piece to get things back on track, I think you need to analyze what went wrong. So, Kev, in your opinion, like what have been like the main deficiencies that have taken a guy who was a successful head coach in Mike Norvell at Memphis, a guy who pulled Florida State out of the abyss, got them to like the near heights that you can get to college football? Like, what were the factors that have led to this like rapid, sudden decline across multiple facets of the program, and why or why not would Gus Malzahn be the guy to alleviate those issues? Because if he's going to be the guy to salvage the tenure, he has to be the missing piece that's kind of fixing what's wrong. So what do you think has gone wrong, and how might Gus be able to fix that if he can?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to approach that question with a single answer. It's
a lot's gone wrong,
right? So you can point to, recruiting struggles, but they've been recruiting top 30 classes, top 20 classes. And I mean, this was a bottom 20 team in the country last year. So like recruiting doesn't fully explain why this team was so bad. You had more pound for pound talent than all the teams you played, except for a handful. So there was something bigger going on here. This was a problem that was larger than talent. I think that messaging had gotten stale. Clearly, I think that there's a sense that the momentum from 22 to 23 kind of allowed these coaches to kind of get out over their skis. I think that this team had lost an identity because they had been able to build for a couple of years off of the back of some talent, off of Jordan Travis, out off of Jared Verse on the defensive side of the ball. They were able to build off of these pieces. And when they had to reload with new pieces, I don't think that they did a very good job of messaging to those new players. I don't think they were able to adapt to having to bring guys up to speed. And instead they were trying to continue adding, they continue putting whipped cream on top of a milkshake that had been drank. And the foundation was no longer in the program. And so they were putting these flourishes, they were working on these things. The playbook had expanded, had grown, had outgrown itself, and the foundations were no longer there. And so when you get into a season when things aren't going the direction you want to go, when your messaging is, hey, we got disrespected by the committee, let's go prove them wrong, and you start losing games early, you don't have a message to fall back on. One, you don't have fundamentals to fall back on. Two, because you're trying to run outside zone, you're trying to run counter, you're trying to have this complicated passing game that requires a quarterback to set protection for you to audible at the line of scrimmage. And when that quarterback's gone, when he's not making those checks, there was nobody to back him up. So in a sense, I think that Gus can help right the ship because Gus has been a head coach for a long time, and Gus has never coached a team as bad as FSU was last year. So clearly he knows how to reload. He went to a national championship and he reloaded. They weren't the best team, but they didn't completely fall off the map. Well, they did one year. I don't remember what year they did. They had like a 3-win season in there randomly. But yeah, I think he's someone who's been around long enough to say, okay, this is where the messaging went wrong. This is how we can stabilize the program. It's the experience of a head coach that I think might be an asset.
Yeah, and that could be something too, because I think and Adam, I'll put the point to you is what do you think Malzahn's greatest strengths are? Because I'd like to see how his greatest strengths match up with the biggest weaknesses. I think one of the strengths is what Kevin was alluded to, is Gus has never pitched a 2-10 season.
Yeah.
Not, and with talent, with the roster, say what you want about the talent of Florida State's roster last year, not up to snuff with obviously the 23 team or great Florida State teams of yore, but it was not a 2-win roster. And Gus Malzahn has never pitched that. So is there some internal levers that he can pull? Are there things that could have been done last year to mitigate the damage that just kind of slipped away from a coaching staff that was grasping for answers? These guys have never. Mike Norvell's never dealt with that level of failure before, so there is no experience in it. So I think that's a point that I think Gus might be good. But to me, where I really feel the failure of 2024 was, and I don't know if Malzahn's going to help with this or not, and it's what really has gotten Florida State into this bind, is talent acquisition. Mm-hmm. And specifically the thing that really got them in a bind last year is player evaluation, and I'm talking about the portal, because they whiffed on 85% of their guys. Yeah. So that's the thing this year. I would think from at least the winter window, the evaluations, particularly receiver, offensive line, they look better on paper than the class before. But obviously we're not really going to be able to answer that question if the evaluation's gotten better until these guys get on the field. So Adam, what are Malzahn's greatest strengths, and how do they mesh with in my opinion, the two biggest weaknesses that have Florida State there have been talent acquisition and then an inability to stop the bleeding when things go wrong, which I don't even know what you call that. That might even be a culture issue. Yeah, those things that Malzahn can help with?
the culture issue stuff, that's got to start with Mike. Now, I'm going to touch on that in a second.
Yeah, and I don't know if it is a culture. I don't know where else to put letting that
how to
disaster
frame
of a
that.
season happen. I don't know what category you put that in, but that's its own thing, right? Things just
and when things tend to spiral, they just they take on a life of their own. But I think the first strength that Gus has is he has an identity. For years now, we've talked about the Mike Norvell offense, and while we've praised it in some instances, we've also talked about its predictability, its inability to be flexible in the run game with motions and stuff like that. It's how slow it's gotten at the line of scrimmage. Gus has a very specific idea of what he wants to be and how he wants to be, and having an identity goes a long way. And it also goes a long way in your player acquisition, because now everybody's on the same page with who and what they're looking for as far as prospects go.
Like roles, defined roles type of thing.
Defined roles, but also what your scheme is. Your scheme is going to be inside zone and run game. So guess what you're going to be looking for in offensive linemen? Inside zone types of blockers. So everybody knows going in when they're evaluating offensive line prospects what they're looking for. They're not going out there trying to find, well, maybe we'll run counter this year. Maybe we'll run outside zone, or no, they're going to run inside zone. That's what they're going to be. They're going to find guys that can do that.
That's a good point.
Now, can they land them? I don't know. Gus can't fix that. He can't solve that. That's a Mike Norvell problem. And that's something that Mike Norvell only himself can really get control of. But I felt like for a while now, what did they go out and get at wide receiver this year? They went out and got a really tall, kind of speedy, vertical guy. They went out and got a shifty, smaller guy. That they were specific in what they were looking for as far as wide receivers go. They went out and got a tight end. They were looking at tight ends. They went out and got one that fit that H-back type of style of tight end. Obviously, there was a fit there he played for Gus, but that's what Gus has kind of used in his career.
There's more focus, and I think that kind of goes. It's a lot different than the guys that they took last year, the Malik Bensons, the Jalen Browns. It was like, we're gonna get some like fast dudes that are really good athletes, and we'll come up with a game plan.
It's an offense built for playmakers. Well, yeah, that's great, but there's got to be something that those playmakers are trying to do, or something that they're specifically good at. And Gus knows what he wants. He knows what he's looking for in evals, along with Herb Hand, his offensive line coach. Like, these guys have done it for a long time. I'm not here to try to make it seem like it's going to be perfect, but for the framework of this conversation and the context that we're talking about of getting this program back to some level of a floor, I think it fits. And that's what I think Gus's greatest strength is that he has an identity. He knows how to work towards that identity, how to get to that identity. And then, it's up to everybody in the collective to build off of that and take this thing to greater heights.
Keeping a job at Auburn as long as he did actually is quite an accomplishment, with the way that booster is structured and the fact that you got to like bash your head up against the SEC West every year. He did find a way to like survive and get good to competent over and over and over again in a way that a head coach there. Who's been the last tenured Auburn head coach that's ever done anything? Like, they chew up head coaches over there.
I do think, though, that it's also important to point out that Gus coming in as your offensive head coach, because that's what he is. He's the head coach of the offense, just like Tony White is the head coach of the defense. Allowing Mike to now be a floater and to be a guy who can be in all places and not have to feel like he's got to be there in the offense. Freeing him up to be able to do those things is a strength, because it's going to hopefully, and it's up to Mike Norvell to capitalize on this opportunity. It's going to allow him to have the fingerprint of everything really have a fingerprint on everything that's going on. So many times you talk about, the climb and you establish all these things, but when you get in the season, it's very easy to lose focus of those little details. And now Mike's going to have the opportunity to make sure he continues to foster those relationships with the players throughout the season, develop that culture as the season plays on. Like, he's not going to be lost on game planning throughout the game week and game prep. Like, he's going to be able to be an all-inclusive head coach, and that I think that's important.
To you, Cav, the overarching question of this, so I think we've talked about, why Florida State has gotten over into this position it's in, how Malzahn can maybe mitigate that. But the overarching question is, can this hire be one of the things that salvages Mike Norvell's tenure at Florida State? So what type of season do they have to have in 2025 for his tenure to be salvaged? And what do they have to do from there? And in your opinion, can the tenure be, can the hole that you're in from 2-10 be dug out of? Historically, it's a very hard thing to do, to rebuild the same program twice under the same leadership. It's not something that, there's not a lot of cases where the guy got a chance to do it anyway. But Mike Norvell is fighting against a tough situation and historical precedent. So if this hire is going to be something that salvages the season, what's the minimum that 2025 has to be to start that salvaging process, and where do they have to go from there?
Yeah, my argument is that record really doesn't matter. I think there's a minimum. I think you got to make a bowl game.
Okay.
But I think what's more important is the feel of the games. So when you're playing a Clemson, when you're playing a Miami, when you're playing a Florida, when you're playing in Alabama, are we embarrassed by the second half? Are we turning the game off in the third quarter? Or is this a game that, at least you can hold it? I mean, I look at 2022 Clemson, right? That's a game you lost.
Yeah.
That's a game that you got behind in. There's a fumble at the end of the first half that kind of put it out of reach, but you kept fighting. And, you got Kirk Herbstreit at the end of the game saying how this team's in the right direction, right? That's a different feeling than getting blown out against Miami last year. There's a difference in how you lose, right? It's not an easy schedule next year. I'm expecting them to lose a fair amount of games, but are you getting blown out, or are you keeping up with these teams? Are you going 1 for 1? Are you staying in it into the third, fourth quarter before maybe the depth of these more talented teams start to take over? That's what I'm looking for.
So quality of play, and I think that that's important. Obviously, you got to get the fan engagement back, man. There's been this delayed anger, which I get, because when you're going through 2-10, it doesn't even seem real, right? And then once you get to a couple months to marinate on it, especially people that have been lifelong Florida State fans, this is a premier brand in college football. Yeah. Ohio State doesn't go 2-10, LSU doesn't go 2-10, Texas doesn't go 2-10. Their disaster seasons are 6 wins. And Florida State fans have suffered 3 of the school's worst embarrassing seasons in the past 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, since Mike's been here.
And in the same way that I'm sure if you would have asked Mike Norvell at the beginning of the season, was 2-10 a possibility for this team and for him as a head coach, he would have said, hell no. In the same way, Florida State fans would have told you 2-10 in Tallahassee is not something that's a possibility. And we saw it. And now it's I don't know what step of the process that we're in, but it feels like this is the anger process, which is fine. But, dude, you start getting embarrassed again after all these hires. Then you get to the apathy process. That's when people close their wallets and that brand new stadium isn't filled. So I'm with you, Kev. It's important for a multitude of reasons. And also you got to have something to sell, because the minimum is the minimum. I think people can quibble over what their personal minimums are. The year after, to not be a lame duck, it's got to be – it's Florida State, dude. And you're getting paid $10 million a year. So I think these are really good points to have about how does the season feel, because it feels so bad right now. So we started off with a question. I think I'm going to ask you guys that question if you want to answer. You don't have to. But it is the summer conversation series. We posed a question. It'd be a cop-out to just end the video without answering the question. I'll go with you first, Kevin. Is this Gus Malzahn hire the first step into Mike Norvell getting his tenure salvaged at Florida State?
I personally think it is. I think that they get on the right track enough. I don't think Gus is his track record as a head coach doesn't blow anybody away, and that's kind of one of the concerns. But I do think he's been a pretty above average to good I think he's been a good to great offensive coordinator throughout his entire career, having to focus on both sides of the ball. I think a little bit more focus on just the offense will do good.
It's all the trend too, with like the Chip Kelly stuff, like the head coach is coming back into like offensive coordinator roles. It is like it is kind of being the trend, right?
Yeah.
I'm worried about like the ceiling of what they can do on offense. I mean, I don't think that this is necessarily like a national championship winning coaching staff at this point. But I do think it brings stability back and it puts things back on the right track to give them a shot in 2 or 3 years to do something. At least I'm hopeful. I like the hire. I think it makes a lot of sense. And maybe he can slap some sense into whatever's happening in that program.
Okay. Adam, to you.
I think Gus is going to help stabilize things, but I think in the end, Mike's inability to really capture the talent acquisition aspect of being a head coach is going to be his undoing. I just don't think he prioritizes it enough of getting guys out there and hunting on the recruiting trail. I just think it's going to catch up to him. I think it's already started to. And while I think Gus is a great hire, I think he's the right hire for this program right now, where they're at, trying to get back to a bowl game this year and kind of stabilizing things. I think in the end, it just won't be enough.
I think I lean more towards you, Adam. My only caveat would be if they overachieve this year, because I think that they've shown that if you can get people engaged, the close of their high school recruiting class at the end of last cycle with Usman Kroma and Shamar Arnu and Kevin Wynn, like they had some juice there, and I'm not going to totally discount that. They're going to need to overachieve because these guys aren't great salesmen. However, if you can get the fan base excited, if you can steal that Alabama game, dude, it's like 2022 LSU again, except way, way more consequential to Mike Norvell. But man, you could get everybody back. You could get everybody back, and you could get them back quick. I just don't expect them to overachieve this year. I expect them to be markedly improved, and I'm with you. And I really like you need to have something you can rely on from an offensive identity and just a level of play. Like competency needed to be restored, because if you didn't restore the competency, you're not going to even have the ability to even have a chance to overachieve. Right. I just think, man, I feel like it's a 6 or 7 win season right now, and you're in a deep hole. So we'll see if they overachieve, if they get ahead of schedule, which they're allowed to do, right? Like
I think you jump to 8. You jump to 8, 9.
Then I start to get more. Because you have so much tied to this man from a restore standpoint, and he's a good dude. Like he works well with Alfred. Like he's a good guy. The city life, but you got to overachieve. I know
people are rolling their eyes saying 8 or 9 wins in year 6. I know. Trust me. I know.
Oh, it's that's why they got to. Well, dude, that's why they got to overachieve.
Yeah.
Because you start to degrade the standards and the results. Talk to some other programs, one in the Midwest, one down south. Like 2013 gets further and further and further away. Yeah. So I'm with you. Like, give the guy a chance based on what he's done. But, dude, if there's no overachieving, the further you get away from that excellence, man, people forget that you were excellent. Love you guys. This is the first video of our summer conversation series. Suggest in the comments below topics that you want next, people you want us to bring on. It'll be a nice melting pot of ideas, opinions, and topics, and we're going to be doing it all summer long. We love you guys. Subscribe to the X's and Knowles YouTube channel, the Knowles 24/7 YouTube channel, back and kicking. Get on Knowles247.com. Hit the forum. What do you think? Jump in the message board. What do you think of the topic we're speaking about? We want to hear what you have to say, because we love you and you're smart. Also, keep chopping.